little video webinar is to acquaint you with the Recovery Support Services billing that is entered into the CIMOR system. So first off, I want to bring your attention to a couple of documents that will be helpful for you. First, you have a Recovery Support Services billing document available, which will walk you through this whole system piece by piece. It talks about the CIMOR portal, how to enter there, how to do help desk tickets, and then it goes through how to use your user ID and password to log on to the CIMOR system, and then it goes into detail about using the CIMOR system. Another document that would be helpful for you is actually your contract, and your contract, basically the RSS IFB that you completed to get a contract, then becomes your contract. Attachment B in that contract includes definitions of all of your services, and within that you have a definition, qualification of the individual that is going to provide the service, service requirements including key service functions of this service, and then requirements for documentation are included at the end. So those documents are going to be very helpful for you. So to get started, after you've logged on to the CIMOR system, the next thing you would do is click on My Org, the plus button next to My Org, and then you'll click on the plus button next to ATR, and then you will click on RS Billing. I am logged in here as Mission Missouri. You have several options regarding this federal grant screen. Make sure it's in the RSS option for this type of thing. This first screen is basically a screen for you to search for the vouchers that are active in your organization. And you can search by the name of the voucher, which is in the drop-down. At this point in time, the vouchers in this drop-down, the type of services are both ATR services and RSS services. So you will have to sort through to choose the RSS services from that list. You can search by the date that a voucher is active or a date range, or you can search by an individual's name or an individual's DMH ID number. So let's look for a consumer that I've entered, Joe Recovery. The yellow little loading button lets you know things are going. Okay, so what has been returned is all of the vouchers that are currently open and active and have dollars against them for Joe Recovery. Within this screen, there's something down here that says remaining days are greater than 0. The check is in the box. Remaining dollars greater than 0. The check is in the box. So when those boxes are checked, it's only going to return vouchers that are currently active. They have days remaining to bill, and they have dollars in them. If you wanted to search for all vouchers, even those that are no longer valid to bill against, you would uncheck those boxes and search again. So these are Joe Recovery's vouchers. His name is here, DMH ID number. The dates of the voucher are listed here, 7/26 to 9/30. That's the date that the service could be provided during that period of time. Remaining units to bill, so that's the number of units, dollar amount, and have you already billed or spent any units is listed here. It's also a remaining days to enter services, and as you can see, it starts out as 90 days from the date that you entered the service. Today is 7/26/2018. That's the date the voucher was created, and the 90 days to enter services starts ticking on that date. So let's start And let's look at entering a service. Wait a minute, let me cancel that. I want to start with care coordination. So let me search again. I had to cancel and come back in. So RSSCC is care coordination. Let's start in there. So you can tell that you're in the right voucher. This voucher was created by Dismos House. It's Mission, Missouri is the service provider and recovery support package. The procedure code RSSCC is for care coordination, 15-minute increments, 536 per unit. You can tell the dates up here, the amount, that kind of thing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to enter the date that we provided this service. And you have to have the date and time in those fields. They have to be entered very precisely. I will also say you want to enter the exact time you started and ended the service, and don't worry about rounding. This system will round for you. So for instance, if you put at least 8 minutes in, it will round up to the next 15, one time per day on that particular client for that particular service. So in this case, it's 9 minutes of care coordination, and it's given me 1 unit for that. Next, I would choose the rendering practitioner. This is the person that you have entered into the system as an individual that is approved to provide this particular service in your organization. We'll choose the practitioner. The service location is office. It's going to be always office. So this is where you would put your note, and your note is required. So what I'm just going to do is copy from our the contract exactly what the definition of what you need to put in here is. So in this case, documentation shall include a description of the service provided, the rendering practitioner, the date of service beginning and ending time service was provided. So the other thing is we might have to, with this one, with care coordination, it doesn't really describe except for what you're providing. So let's talk about what the service is, and let's look at the key service functions here. I'm going to copy key service functions over here. Arranging or referring for services and resources, advocating for services and quality of services, monitoring service delivery, ensuring communication and coordination of services, locating and coordinating services and resources, providing experiential training and resource acquisition, and when funded, care coordination may provide the provision of bus passes to individuals, and there should be specific recovery goals that these are following. So let's go up here now and click Save. And as you can see, this was now entered into the system. And if I want to go back and do some more billing, I'll hit cancel, and I'll go back and find Joe Recovery again. So let's go to another service. This one will be spiritual counseling. Now, if I want to demonstrate something to you here. If I attempt to put the service in at the same time as the service I just billed, it would reject when I try to save it. Oh, so here's another issue for us. So when I put spiritual counseling in at this point in time, in this test system, we don't have a practitioner set. Oh, we have one practitioner set up. Okay, so this is the individual that would have the qualification of qualified clergy in order to bill spiritual counseling for Mission, Missouri. So let's choose them, choose the office location. I'm going to find the so for spiritual counseling, you do need to be you need to pay attention to what the definition of spiritual counseling is. And I'm gonna copy some of these in here for you so you see what I'm talking about. Establishing or reestablishing a relationship with a higher power, developing a personal connectedness with a spiritual, religious, or faith-based entity, acquiring skills needed to cope with life-changing incidents. Anyway, look through this over. Spiritual counseling is not just the same as counseling provided by a clergy. It is a very specific definition of services. And the documentation requirements is you do have to put a description of the service provided, and you're already going to have the rendering practitioner in the office, and rendering practitioner start date in that sort of time in there, the date and the time, in beginning and ending time. So as I said, though, I think this will reject. Let's click save and see. So the red error message you can pay attention to. It's saying you can't save this because the service already exists for this consumer during this time period. So we'll go in here and we'll change this to actually the time I made a mistake, and the time that I actually was providing this service was 9 to 9:27. It was after they were done with their other service. So now we'll look for a save and see what happens. So now it's saved. The system does do checks real time on many of your different pieces of information to keep you from making some mistakes here. So let's search again for Joe, and let's look at other services that are down there. So let's talk about this one is recovery housing. Let's talk about billing recovery housing. So recovery housing requires the date, and it's automatically going to be 1 unit because it's 1 unit because it's 1 day of service. Rendering practitioner would be the person who is monitoring the house that evening when the person was there. And let's, so the documentation for this is really pretty simple. It's basically the documentation for housing really is, I'm looking for that. Okay, so I'll copy the documentation requirement and paste it over here for you. Individual's name, date of the overnight stay, date at 11:59 p.m. And the rendering practitioner is the name of the person, the staff that was responsible for monitoring the housing that evening. So we'll click save on this one. I'm primarily demonstrating to you the functionality of the system. Not necessarily trying to give you all the definitions of the services. So the other one that I want to demonstrate is recovery support drop-in, peer drop-in center. So a peer drop-in center is really for a month of services. So it really, you know, you would enter this after you've done a month of services. Let me put what the billing of documentation is required down here for you. And we'll talk about this. Okay, so for peer drop-in center, you would put in here after the month, you would put what days, what particular dates this individual visited the drop-in center during that past 30 days. And it needs to be, they need to have been there a minimum of 7 days in order to bill for the month. And you should have indicated what drop-in center activities the individual participated in. And your rendering practitioner would be the MRSS or CPS person responsible for monitoring the drop-in center. So it's Missouri Recovery Support Specialist or Certified Peer Specialist responsible for monitoring the drop-in center during that period of time. We ask that you have a sign-in sheet. And this is a paper document where you would have the individual sign in each day when they're visiting the drop-in center, and that will be maintained in your organization. So let's see if this will let me save it or not. It does. You should not be billing before you provided the service. So since the voucher was created today, you would have to have demonstrated that you've done services over the last 30 days with that person. Okay, so I'm going to clear this, and I want to demonstrate for you specifically the difference about doing groups. So if we go down here and find RSSG group, and if we put in a particular day, and we hit search, what we have returned is a list of all of the individuals for our organization that have an active voucher for group services on the day of 7/26. This is the way I can build one group billing for multiple people. So I put a check mark next to the people that were in the group that day. I click Add Group Encounters. And now what I've done is I've basically built I'm beginning to build a billing that I can put one note in, and then that will work for multiple people. So let's put the beginning and ending time of the group. Once again, this is important for you to put the exact time that you started and the exact time you finished. You cannot bill for breaks, restroom breaks, that kind of thing. So if you have to break a group up into 2 sections, do that. You can click on Calculate Units or just click on the white space and it will calculate the units for you. You choose the rendering practitioner, and then you'll do your service notes. So let's look for. I'm going to find the group documentation. So for the most part, group is a little different. We require a little bit different in your documentation. We want let's look at what we're saying. So the type of group service. So first off, most of your groups have a name for them. And go ahead and put the name of the group in there. And then if you need to, put the definition of what type of group that is. And then if this particular group has a plan that was pre-developed for this group, and you have that plan available, then put that plan. If it's a copy and paste, whatever, copy and paste, put it in the note. But then you need to have a description of the group service provided. And this is a description of what the individual running the group that's billing for this did. Then we want you to have multiple individual responses to the group service. So this could be, you could put, because you're building a note that's going to go in multiple people's files. So this could be individuals' initials, JR, or just the first name. Jane said that she had never thought about recovery in this way before. That's a quote that you just paste exactly what she said and put it in there. Joe says he feels better after this group, or whatever exact quote. And I would say if you put 3, 4 individual consumer quotes in a note, you have individualized that note by having exact quotes from individuals. You do want the rendering practitioner is the person doing the group, the date, beginning and ending time. You would also keep a group sign-in participation log that you're going to keep within your own files, and you're going to maintain the group log with individual signatures. So after we've done all of this, there's a step here that's an extra step, apply to list below. So the reason why we do this is now, let's say Jane actually left the group at 10:45 to go start she was pulled out to go meet with her recovery coach. And so now what we've done is we've changed this so that Jane's billing reflects beginning and ending time that's different than the rest of the participants in the group. And now her service won't conflict with the other service that's going to be billed. So that's the way you can individualize the ending times of the services. Now I'll click Save. Now there's a different message that you get with this than with the other one. So the message here, this is not an error message, this is an informational message. And it's telling you that these 2 group recovery support encounter request records have been saved for this evening's process cycle. That basically means they can't do all of the edits and checks for group billing because there's multiple people being entered at the same time, up to 30. At the immediate time you press that button. So it's saved for an evening process cycle, and then they check. They check those after that. So I'm going to click clear on that. The next thing I want to demonstrate for you just a little bit is the Recovery Support Services search feature. So let's go back over here. Okay, so now what we're looking at is this is a search screen that allows us to look for all of the services that we have already put into this system. So we could search for a particular service. Let's hit search and see what shows up. And so what shows up is the service we just put in for Joe Recovery. We see that it's in here, and the status is it's in process. That means it's in these statuses, there's multiple statuses. So for the most part, the statuses are things like it's in process, it's on the open invoice, it's paid in full, or some other type of status of the process. The only thing that I would say is really going to be different is the group ones. So let's search for the group ones. So we have 2 of them. You'll notice these groups are in green, and that's because it's showing that they're in this group request to process status. So they're in this special group that's waiting to have their group process. Then after the group process, it will go to in process, and it will go through that cycle. And then that'll be reserved. However, what you should look for is if there was a conflict, once it goes through this process cycle, when you enter group stuff, you do need to search. And if you find one that's red, what you're going to have to fix it, because the red ones will be group processed with error. That means there was a conflict, and it's going to hang out there until you fix it. But if you have one that's red and it has the message group processed with error, you could click on view next to it, and it will tell you the error description down here. And usually it's something like, this individual was already involved in a group at this time, or was already involved in a service at this time, or this rendering practitioner was already delivering another service at this time. Obviously, group doesn't count for those services. So then if you fix it and save it, then it has a chance to go through the process. Otherwise, if it's red, it hangs out there forever. So you will have to resolve that. The only other thing I would say that you have access to, well, so that's, I think that's probably a good place to stop with that. Well, let me just say, when you enter services, what you're doing is you're putting things on an invoice. Basically, your open invoice, think of the invoices every time you save a service and it goes through the process cycle, it's going to be added to an open invoice. And then that invoice, when it closes and processes, you'll be paid for the services on that invoice. When it does that, there'll be another invoice that will be open, and those services will be added to that invoice. And so about every 2 weeks, an invoice closes and you get paid for it, and another invoice opens. So that's the method that you get paid, is invoices. Okay, so keep in mind you can always ask questions, contact DMH and Jesse Crum, Rosie Anderson Harper, and the individuals in the Recovery Support Services team. Ask questions specifically about this if you have problems or questions. Also, your access sites are individuals that are very experienced with this billing system, and they can probably give you technical assistance also. Okay, thank you very much.